All right, so we've unboxed the Switch OLED. I have had a chance to play a bunch of games on it, but now it's time to take it apart. And even though Nintendo's using the same X1 chip that they have in the red box Switch and that Switch Lite, I was curious what other changes they made inside of this system, as obviously they've made some other larger changes outside of this chip with the screen and the kickstand and just the overall build of this system. And today we're gonna find out. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So the first thing we'll notice with this system is it appears Nintendo has worked to hide some of the screws that we'd normally see right on the back of the current red box Switch. They're just out there. It's like you could look around the corners and see a couple of different screws, but for this one, they tried to go with more of a unified body look where they hid the screws. Specifically though, they worked to hide some of the back screws underneath of this kickstand here, along with some of the I guess the legal writing and a serial number, and we also have our micro SD card slot down here. We do still have several screws around the top portions, and then we also have them on the side. These appear to all be Phillips head screws around the edges, and most likely we have, yes, some tri-wing screws inside. Now we do also have the added wrinkle of the larger kickstand that takes up the whole bottom back portion of this system. And they have some pretty serious hinges in there, and that was something I was very curious about, were the quality of those hinges, because we see in laptops and other devices that have to open and close, the hinges will wear out over time and become unusable, even at times breaking part of the device and taking it along with it. But we can see here we have a Phillips head screw right here, and then there's also one right here. We just have to take those off, and we should have this entire piece of plastic come off. And with those screws out, these two covers will remove, and we can see the metal hinges they have here, as well as the mechanism that works to close. We can see this kind of slides through this little guide as it closes, and it has a lot of tension to it, which is great because when you set it down, you can kind of press on the switch and it'll open and close. And because of the way that they have this mechanism set up, there's no defined like spaces where it has to be when it opens and closes for support. It's a good idea by Nintendo to go this route and to have two separate hinges on either side that are metal. Does work to kind of increase the overall quality and the feel of it. I'm really happy that Nintendo decided to take the feedback correctly for the Switch kickstand, because we went from one that was hardly usable to one that was probably even over-engineered to a degree. Now it looks like we have two screws here and here, just kind of holding this back plastic portion on. And we can see another screw in here and here. Okay, and with the kickstand off, these hinges will press down, and we can see we need to remove these screws as well as all of the screws around the edges. I am curious about the side screws here on the railing, mostly because with the older Switch, you only really had to remove one or two, I believe, in the center, since this back housing didn't have any kind of clips at the top here. So we'll figure out, I guess, the minimal amount of screws you need to remove in order to get the backing off. So it does appear that the only screws from the side you need to remove are these top two ones, as the bottom and even that middle screw don't actually go through the side panel at all. And again, that's sort of how it was with the original Switch, where you only had one bracket on the side just holding the back on. The less screws you have to remove, I would say, the better when it comes to taking something like this apart. We can see where the hinges do screw in here, and the nice part about this is it looks like the hinges are completely removable and replaceable. This is great because that means that if your hinge does break, which it's gonna happen to somebody out there, it is a part that should be fairly easy to replace. We have two more screws here. You just put the hinge back in here, replace it, and then you're off and running. Okay, so first impressions, just taking the backing off here. We do have our antennas staring right at us. Now, they weren't able to put the antennas on the other side, I guess, where the OLED display is. They had mentioned that the OLED display had to be as thin as possible to make all of this work. So rather than hiding the antennas at the front, which is what they did with the original one, actually around those bezels that are very noticeable, it looks like they just put the Wi-Fi Bluetooth antennas up here, for example, right above where the fan is, and then one on the top left corner if you're looking at it, which is fine for placement. It won't get in the way of anything, and it's not really gonna cause much interference considering the entire back is just all plastic anyway. But it is just one more thing to be mindful of when you remove this metal piece. I am curious, it looks like this is technically part of this, so I assume when I unscrew this backing, I guess the whole thing will lift out. We're gonna find out in a second. Anyway, we'll just unplug these right here and here, and then we'll search around the edges for screws. I removed all the silver screws around the edges. There's also one by the fan here, and then one right under this cable in the plastic. And there is something that's going to annoy some people, and that has to do with the routing of this cable to this antenna, because it does go underneath of sort of the bracing that they have here, which means you probably are gonna have to peel this back completely and then sort of kind of snake it around underneath. Otherwise, you could tug on it, maybe even rip something. You can see back here, it sort of goes under this clip here, under this clip here, and then it routes back up to the antenna. A little annoying, because otherwise this wouldn't be a problem, just to leave the antennas where they are and then just sort of lift this up after moving the screws. So it looks like there would be more to do when you get to this phase compared to the older Switch, but not necessarily. Unfortunately, though, this cable makes it a little harder. But with the metal shielding off, we have a very familiar glob of like thermal goop or whatever here. I'm gonna go ahead and just unplug the battery. That's probably the first thing you should do when you get to this portion. Remove any source of power you can from the board. Now, looking over this, it does appear Nintendo did consolidate some of their boards. We had many modular boards in the older Switch. It looks like Nintendo wanted to remove some of the modular parts from this, and for example, take the card slot here and attach it to our micro SD card slot. They also have a little sticker up here covering up, I guess, the screw that's holding this sideboard down. I don't really know why Nintendo is doing that, unless they just want to be able to tell if people have been inside, but we're well beyond the need for warranty stickers at this point. It looks like only one screw is holding this down, and that's another way Nintendo can cost save or cut costs, I should say, is if they can make it so that these boards essentially snap into place, as we see here, and just really have one screw, which also works to support our headphone jack. Again, all of this is tied into one board. Now, taking a look at this board, I had originally thought this was like the flash memory. It appears to just be a padding that they have here. And I can only assume this padding is in place to help keep pressure down on this board, because it only has one screw holding it in. So if they can create some extra pressure right around where it clicks in using this, and then the back that also gets screwed in, that'll help to keep this from essentially being jarred loose. Now, they do still have the headphone jack, along with the game card slot, along with your micro SD card slot, all on one board. So you are gonna be replacing a good chunk if something happens to, say, your headphone jack, where your plug just kind of breaks off into it. But I guess they've had it mostly modular up until this point, where just this SD card slot was off on its own. They just wanted to connect this entire board, again, to consolidate and save money. Now, there are several clips you want to look out for. For example, we have our Joy-Con rail that runs down and around to the board here, as well as on this side, a longer cable runs down around and underneath right to here. So you want to make sure you unclip these very carefully, and you can pop these out. This appears to be running from the screen. This one would just kind of clip upwards. After we start removing those and then seeking out some of these silver screws that are holding down our motherboard, we should be able to get it removed, as well as the heatsink. So we can see I've made some progress here, but I would be to the point now where I could remove the fan, and unfortunately I've had to remove quite a bit in order to get to this point. The fan is something that is moving in the system, so it can fail, obviously. And it's something I've heard from people that they've had issues with the fan stopping and just not functioning anymore, and the system overheating. So you do have to go quite a few screws deep before you can get to this fan, unfortunately. But otherwise, at this point, just a couple of screws is holding it down, and that looks like it plugs in right here. The two screws down here are a bit longer, and that's just to support the USB-C charge port, so keep that one in mind, so you don't put one of these longer screws through like one of these spots up here. You could actually end up driving that screw into the screen on the other side. All right, and our board is now free. Something I've noticed is the screen itself only needs one cable. It's this small cable right here. It looks like this is our button board that's up here. So if like your power or volume, or I guess even your, looks like your light sensor starts acting up, you can replace it. It does go around the battery here, and this is something you could order for the older Switch. I assume they'll eventually become easier to find online for this model. But the screen being one clip, one cable, does make it a bit easier when you're closing it up or working to replace it, because before we would have a couple of generally a couple of wires. And we have like a backlight, an LCD wire, and I thought we also had something for the digitizer on the front, but I'm only seeing one here. That does make it a bit easier, especially if what you should see online, if you do break your screen anyway, is a replacement screen that's already like assembled, because generally the glass and the screen come together as one piece. Oh, and as for those speakers that Nintendo has advertised as having just better quality, better sound with this Switch OLED model, it was described how they achieved this in a recent Q&A with the developers for this system, where they mentioned going from an open speaker setup to a closed speaker setup, which some of that appeared to stem from the design of the OLED model, still trying to fit into certain parameters while using that OLED display and other factors there. But according to them, moving to the closed speaker setup allowed them to increase pressure on the speaker and the sounds that were being emitted, which allowed them to get a more intense sound overall. I removed the panels above the SoC and the RAM. Not much else to really talk about with these because it's the same chip, same RAM that we've had in the previous red box Switch. Remember, the biggest change they made was that OLED display, but I did notice that on the back, we have our 64 gigabytes of memory. They have that now located soldered directly to the board. This is one from Samsung. And before they had it as its separate piece, so it was modular. And I guess in the factory, it worked out for them to do that, because then if one was going bad and it was like a corrupt flash NAND, for example, they could pop it off, pop a new one on, set it up for this board, and then send it on its way through their refurbishment. But there are probably a few reasons why they decided to just solder it directly to the board. One, it most likely does save them money overall because they don't have to have like a socket or anything here on the board. And two, might have something to do with the hacking scene, the homebrew scene that I noticed was tapping into that eMMC memory, the 32 gigabytes we had on board. So maybe in Nintendo's mind, you know what, we'll save money and we'll also work to at least throw a wrench into their plans when people are trying to modify these systems. So now looking at everything here in front of me, it does appear Nintendo did work to consolidate a lot of the modular pieces they originally had in that Switch, that red box one. Probably, like I said, to save money, but then they also did things like over-engineered the back kickstand completely, which makes sense considering that's something you're gonna be using, at least in their mind, quite a bit, and it's something you see. You won't necessarily see that they took several boards, consolidated them down into one, and then, for example, soldered the 64 gigabytes of memory onto the board itself. I think this is probably a good way for Nintendo to go, but it does make it harder to just repair one part of the system because so much is attached to, say, this board here. You're just probably replacing this entire board. But looking at everything else though, it's a good system in terms of build quality. I noticed that the heatsink is a bit thinner. It is smaller. It's easier to bend, certainly. But as I mentioned before, the chip inside of this, that Mariko Tegra chip, does not get that hot in the first place. I had to do a lot just to overheat the original Switch, and that pulled more power than this. That one, I believe, pulled 12 watts. This one pulls 7 watts. So once again, something they were probably able to save money on had to do with the copper that was used here, as well as the overall volume and size of the heatsink. But I think looking at it, for the most part, it's a well-built system all the way around. And I guess that'll conclude our look inside of the new Switch OLED system. I have to put it back together now and start working through Metroid Dread. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.